right. Welcome everyone to today's presentation on water and climate. This is one more in a series of presentations that we're doing in order to help people prepare for Environmental Day at the Capitol. Today's presentation and Environmental Day at the Capitol is on February 12th, just to make sure everyone's aware of that. Uh, today's presentation focuses on water and climate and what's going on here in Arizona with both. And our presenter today is Jennifer Martin-McLeod. And Jennifer is the Water Sentinels Program Manager for Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Sandy, and welcome everyone. And before I even gonna get started, I'm just gonna thank everyone in advance for your patience as I work my way through this. I am experiencing a migraine right now, and I don't know it more than being in pain or being nauseated. The problem I'm having right now, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced a migraine aura. If you have, you know what's going on with me already, but for those of you that haven't, I can basically see like a little couple spots on the screen right now. I mostly cannot see well right now, so it's difficult to tell where the buttons are and what slide I'm on and stuff like that. So I'll just ask for a little patience. If there are pauses during the presentation, it is just because I'm hunting on the screen for the button to advance to the next slide and that kind of thing. So thanks for your patience, and I will get started sharing my screen and finding my presentation. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm just gonna go camera off while I'm presenting. And I will go back on. I'm actually not having a lot of luck doing that, so I will just leave camera on while I'm presenting. So I think I've already accidentally advanced screens. So thanks everyone for joining this presentation on climate change and water in Arizona. Today we're going to explore how rising temperatures and prolonged droughts and shifting precipitation patterns are reshaping Arizona's water resources. So whether you're preparing for advocacy at Environmental Day at the Legislature or you just want to learn more, this discussion is intended to inform and inspire action. So let's dive in. And again, like Sandy said, my name is Jennifer Martin-McLeod, and I'm Water Sentinels Program Manager for the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club, which is work I have been proud to be a part of for about 10 years now. So here's an outline of what we'll cover today. First, we will examine Arizona's unique water landscape. Then we'll delve into the impacts of climate change on water resources. We will explore the challenges and solutions, and finally discuss ways that you can advocate for a change. So Arizona is one of the driest states in the US. I'm sure you're all aware of that. Our water comes primarily from the Colorado River, other rivers like the Verde and the Salt, and groundwater. And there's an element of reclaimed water as well that is becoming more and more subject of debate as our other water resources dwindle and the spotlight is more and more placed on reclaimed water for a solution. Agriculture consumes the lion's share at about 70%, followed by municipal and industrial uses. And then of municipal uses, it's been estimated that about 80% goes to landscaping. So essentially, the vast majority of the water that is used in the state goes toward growing plants that we have decided we want to grow for one reason or another. So I'm sure that we're all well aware of the basics of climate change, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, it refers to the long-term alteration of temperature and weather patterns. Here in Arizona, the average temperature has increased by over 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900. And these rising temperatures are causing prolonged droughts and altering precipitation patterns, creating significant stresses and challenges for our water systems and the environment. Climate change is already impacting Arizona's water. Droughts are becoming more prolonged, and snowpack in the Colorado River Basin, which is a critical water source, as we already discussed, is decreasing. So this results in less water storage and earlier spring runoff. Additionally, warmer temperatures mean more evapotranspiration through plants, and higher temps plus lower precipitation mean that more snowmelt is trapped by parched soils rather than contributing to flow in the rivers. So there are many ways that the different impacts of climate change kind of conspire to have a lot less water in our rivers. Colorado River flows, it's estimated, could decline by up to 35% by 2060, further straining our water supply. So the Colorado River gets a tremendous amount of attention. It is a very significant source of water, although it's sometimes a frustration that it seems like the spotlight rests entirely on the Colorado River when we have a lot of other really important rivers in the state as well. But just to touch on the Colorado River, since it is a very significant river, it is a lifeline for 40 million people, and it is in crisis. Like I mentioned, studies reveal that current river flow is at its lowest point in 1,200 years, and Arizona faces additional challenges due to its junior water rights, which mean reduced allocations during shortages. Negotiations for long-term river management are critical to our future. And in these discussions, it's also critical to remember that the Colorado River is not just an irrigation ditch. Sometimes that's how water managers treat it, but in reality, it supports vibrant ecosystems, it supports endangered species and outdoor recreation. It provides water for riparian habitats and wetlands that support diverse wildlife. Endangered species like the humpback chub and the southwestern willow flycatcher depend on these habitats. And the river also affects ecosystem services such as natural flood control, nutrient cycling, and groundwater recharge. And it also drives recreation and tourism that attract millions of visitors annually to boat and fish and explore explore iconic landscapes like the Grand Canyon and other beautiful areas along the river's course. So groundwater is another significant source of water, both for municipal and agricultural and industrial interests in the state, and also for environmental interests. And I hear things talked about that way a lot, and I sometimes feel like it's kind of a false dichotomy. People will say, on the one hand, we have human interests, and on the other hand, we have these environmental concerns, and they're really all the same. We're part of nature, and if there's not water for rivers, there's not going to be water for agriculture either, ultimately, and those kinds of things. And so I'm trying to weed that false dichotomy out of my own speech and just say that groundwater is another really significant critical resource in Arizona. It supplies up to 40% of water use in Arizona. Looking at it at the statewide level, there are some areas of the state where it's pretty much entirely reliant on groundwater and areas where they don't have access to surface water. But if you look at it statewide basis, it's about 40% of Arizona's water. And areas like Pinal County and some other areas of the state are facing massive shortfalls in the coming decades. In Pinal, it's estimated there's going to be a shortfall of over 8 million acre feet by 2115. So very concerning future for some of these areas that are heavily, heavily reliant on groundwater. Unfortunately, rural areas lack adequate regulations, and that leads to overpumping and land subsidence. That damages buildings and roads and landscapes, and it creates hazardous conditions. And once it's occurred, there's no going back. If an aquifer collapses, there's no trying to recharge water to that area again. It's pretty much game over at that point. So reduced stream flows are devastating a lot of Arizona's ecosystems, as probably a lot of you are aware. I don't know where in the state you all live. You may be scattered around the state, and it's possible that you all are aware of some local watershed that you live within that has been impacted by reduced stream flows. Riparian habitats that support diverse species are drying up, leaving only a tiny fraction of streams flowing year-round in Arizona. And that's especially concerning as some federal regulations that protect what's known as ephemeral streams, or streams that just flow part of the year, are going away, and in the coming administration, probably unlikely to be restored. Local action is probably going to be our best bet there. Iconic species like the Gila top minnow and the southwestern willow flycatcher are under threat, and drying wetlands affect pollinators and all kinds of other migratory species critical to agriculture and healthy ecosystems. There are socioeconomic impacts as well. Water scarcity has profound economic and social impacts. Arizona's agriculture, which produces 90% of the nation's winter lettuce, relies heavily on irrigation. Rapid urban growth in Phoenix Metro and other areas of the state is further straining resources, leading to higher costs for infrastructure that are then passed on to residents. So here what we're talking about is water access inequities that are pretty stark in Arizona. For example, on the Navajo Nation, it's estimated that about 30% of households lack running water, and groundwater contamination from mining and other industries further exacerbates that problem. So inclusive water policies and adequate funding are increasingly essential to addressing these disparities in the context of a changing climate. So despite these challenges, there are solutions that we can work toward. Conservation efforts can make a difference, and strengthening groundwater and habitat protections through policy is critical, as well as advocating for sustainable water management. So Arizona law, for example, should recognize the connection between groundwater and flow in our rivers, and should protect flow in the rivers to ensure adequate wildlife habitat and ecosystem health. Policy and collaboration are key. So revisiting the Groundwater Management Act of 1980 to cover rural areas, and to recognize the connection between groundwater and surface water, as we discussed, and to protect rivers and create equitable access to water is all absolutely necessary, and things that we are working toward. So here are some of the things that you can do. You may well be on this call because you're preparing for Environmental Day at the legislature. If not, you're still obviously welcome to be part of this discussion, but we do invite you to participate in Environmental Day if you're not already plugged into that. There are many personal actions that you can take regarding your landscaping, your choice of a plant, your personal habits. You can support local water conservation initiatives. And even just by being here today, you're contributing to the solutions because you're learning more about Arizona's water policies, and you can share that knowledge with others in your sphere. You can support organizations working to conserve water and restore rivers, such as the Sierra Club and other organizations as well. And you can advocate for climate action to address root causes and climate policies to secure a sustainable future. And I think that's about all I had. We've got, I'm happy to answer questions, and you all know Sandy is on the call as well. I'm sure she is. And if we want to uh, dovetail this into a conversation about energy policies and that kind of thing, which is germane to the topic. I don't know. I don't want to put Anna on the spot, but she works on energy policy and she's here as well and might be available to be part of the conversation. So I will just open it up for questions at this time.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Do you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen at this point then,
Sure.
and then um, we can
Stop
see
sharing.
everyone. If you have a question or comment, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can unmute. One thing I was going to mention, and you may have more questions about this, there are a lot of water bills that have been introduced in the legislature already. I would say at least 30, maybe closer to 40. Uh, a number of those bills are not going to be particularly helpful for our creating more sustainable water policies. They are more bills to kind of get around provisions of the Groundwater Management Act. And so far, a bill has not been introduced that will help address the, the water needs in rural Arizona. Um, so I did want to, or, there, or yeah, overall, uh, they're not looking very good. Now, there are a couple bills that have been introduced that we are supporting, including for sustaining flows in rivers. And we'll be getting you the bill numbers. We're still going through the bills. Unfortunately, because those bills are largely sponsored by Democrats, they will be unlikely to get a hearing. So uh, stay tuned for more on the water bills. We'll be lobbying on Environmental Day and beyond. We won't be able to address all of them, so we're reading through them. We'll prioritize and make sure you have background information on them. All right, and Kate has a question. Can you address the water use issue of large data centers? Do they always recycle for reuse? Uh, Ditto for chip manufacturers.
Sure. So there is an element of recycling and reuse that is involved. It's true that they are large. They do use a lot of water in those facilities. When you look at it in terms of the big picture and compare it to what especially ag uses or what municipalities use, messaging wise, it can kind of appear like a drop in the bucket of Arizona's water use, even though it is important to consider every drop in the bucket and to recognize that they are using a lot of water in those data centers. It probably doesn't compare to some other industries in the state. Something that we're definitely looking really hard at as being as much of an issue as water quantity is water quality, because they do sometimes discharge wastewater that they are unable to reuse into washes and systems, dry systems like that. And so it's just really critical to um, look closely at their permits through the Department of Environmental Quality and elsewhere and ensure that any wastewater discharge that they're engaging in is properly cleaned up such that there won't be leaching of pollutants into aquifers or anything that could potentially reach rivers and streams in terms of pollutants. Sandy, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say industrial users don't have the same kinds of requirements relative to water as you know, development does. So if you're inside an active management area and you're planning a subdivision, you have to demonstrate a 100-year assured water supply, and there are water conservation requirements that come along with that. If you're agriculture, you you can't irrigate new agricultural land, but um, your conservation measures are best management practices, so not really very stringent. And then for industrial users, there are no like specific requirements. Some of the cities do have um, some things that they negotiate, but uh, for example, a mining operation doesn't have any conservation requirements. And that's something that, as far as the a rural water bill, I know the governor's office and some of the minority leaders in the House and Senate have really been focusing on including those types of entities in requirements for, uh, you know, like overall. So it's just not agriculture or not just development, but it includes industrial as well. And I guess we'll see how that moves forward. And then just one quick final comment on that. When they are using reverse osmosis for treating wastewater, that does use a lot of water. So there's a lot of water that's wasted as well. And but as Jennifer noted, we don't want them discharging water that has harmful chemicals, PFAS, and other stuff that ends up in our waters. Let's see, what kind of impact can rainwater harvesting and green stormwater infrastructure have on our water security?
I mean, something that I talked about earlier in the talk was how of the percentage of the water use in Arizona that is used for municipal purposes, about 80% of it goes to landscaping. So I think if you're, able to reduce your reliance on municipal water sources through rainwater harvesting and support any landscaping or even other household uses by doing that, that's certainly meaningful. A lot of municipalities in Arizona are more and more kind of scrambling for looking at what the next 100 years of water resources are going to look like in some of these communities. So, yeah, it's certainly meaningful. There's always that kind of elephant in the room when you're talking about water management in Arizona that like 70% of it is ag. So that I think makes people feel frustrated or a sense of futility in terms of trying to do anything about water conservation when so much is going to ag. It almost can feel insignificant what you do at home, but I really have to push back about that on that. I know I take measures in my own home, certainly, again, because, okay, so 70% is ag, but that is still leaving a very significant and growing amount as our population grows that people are relying on. And so anything that you can do, including rainwater harvesting, to reduce your own reliance on groundwater and rivers and other sources that the municipalities get their water from is worthwhile. Sandy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that, um, and yeah, anything that we can do, it's both having an impact, but also sending a message that we do live in an arid region and we should try and utilize the tiny bit of rainfall that we get in order to uh, sustain, outdoor vegetation that helps to keep our communities cooler. And I think yeah, and less strain on the municipal system overall. So, um, Tim,
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Jennifer. I really enjoyed your presentation of a great overview of the predicament that we're in. I wanted to comment on one aspect that probably there's bills on this topic and that we need to watch really closely. And the topic is converting sewage water into potable water. And that's going to, as that gets done and increases, it's going to increasingly take water that's previously been discharged into our rivers, and they're called effluent um, dependent waters. And if if the amount of water in those streams goes down, it's going to have very dramatic effects on our riparian areas. So, for example, the Santa Cruz River is one of those, through Tucson, it's one of those rivers that's quite dependent on effluent discharges. And the Gila River south of downstream of Phoenix, our wastewater treatment plants discharge millions and millions of gallons that go through reclamation ponds. And it has built up in the Tres Rios area of extremely valuable riparian area. And there are other areas and cities around Arizona that discharge water into streams that create uh, riparian areas that are dependent on that discharge. So I think we need to be, I think I'm recommending that we be very watchful and have this as a discussion item anytime we're talking about turning toilet to tap waters and make sure that we're considering the impacts to uh, current riparian areas that are dependent on that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Tim. That has been very much the nature of Sierra Club's comments throughout anywhere that there have been permitting activities or planning activities surrounding the so-called toilet to tap or advanced water purification is what Department of Environmental Quality is calling it right now. That has been very central to our comments is that increased competition for effluent. People talk about it like it's some net gain in water resources, ignoring the fact that it's already being used, not just, as you said, in rivers, which is very significant, but also a lot of irrigation activities of parks and things like that, and golf courses and things like that. And so if you're removing it from areas where it's being used, whether it's to sustain river flows or to irrigate landscaping, that's not a net gain. That's just shifting use somewhere else. And so I think that, managers and decision makers kind of like to tout it as this new source and this great thing we're doing. But yeah, like you said, in reality, this water is going to um, valuable purposes already. Yeah.
great. And I just was thinking we probably should have a little definitions for some of the words for Environmental Day, because I'm not sure everyone is familiar with, like, effluent is just, that's wastewater, that's treated wastewater. And riparian is that vegetation that is sustained along rivers and streams. I just want to make sure everyone is familiar with what we're talking about. All right. And then Anna, do you want me to read your question, or did you just want to come off mute and ask it?
Oh yeah, I can just ask it. Yeah, because I know you mentioned, the agricultural use of water, and also mentioned I didn't know how much that was going to like lettuce that grows. So it just got me thinking too of like other topics that have come up the last couple years with Arizona water, like stopping some of the alfalfa growing that wasn't even benefiting like the United States. Not that it has to, but that was like a crop that was just taking up so much water. So just curious on what are some of those other crops. Yeah, because as a part-time gardener, it just got me thinking, wow, like if we can get so much of the US to like grow our own lettuce, like some of us are trying to, like, I wonder how much of that, or if people knew how much like, lettuce goes to waste a lot too in the food industry. And we knew that that was costing a lot of Arizona's water to not stay here. Yeah, just that's like a powerful thing. So yeah, just curious on what are some of the other crops.
Yeah, those are all valid points. It's ag in Arizona, and I'm sure Sandy will have a lot to add, but just in brief, it's such a complicated problem to tease apart because the reason that we grow a lot of these crops here, even though we have such limited water resources, is the incredibly long growing season. And so that stat that I gave on lettuce is specific to winter lettuce, not year round. And most of the country's winter lettuce comes from Yuma. And so you raised some really valid points about waste in our food systems and things like that, and if that could be reduced that way. You also touched on the subject of possibly shifting to crops that might make more sense in an arid environment. And there is a lot of discussion about sorghum and winter crops like barley and drought resilient crops like tepary beans maybe becoming a bigger part of the bigger pieces of the agricultural puzzle in Arizona to help not have ag strain our water resources so much, but take advantage of that long growing season. So, yeah. And then as far as alfalfa goes, I mean, it's just, can be a really unpopular conversation to explore whether our preferred diet kind of as a country and even a planet is really sustainable and that alfalfa is, that's cattle feed. And so just across the board, cattle do use an incredible amount of water. And so we are going to at some point start to, I think, start to have to ask ourselves if the appetite for cattle can really be supported from a water perspective globally. Sandy, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, alfalfa is our thirstiest crop. Yeah, it is partly because of the growing season and they get several cuttings. But um, if you look at areas where there has been significant land subsidence, which is basically where the land sinks, um, a lot of it is associated with groundwater pumping for irrigating alfalfa. Cotton is also a pretty thirsty crop, and that is uh, also grown a lot in Arizona. And so both of those, and they even feed cotton seeds to cattle too. Uh, and I know a lot of people are familiar with the Fondamonte issue related to the Saudi Arabian farm that is growing alfalfa using a lot of groundwater and then shipping it to Saudi Arabia. But we also have other interests that come in from elsewhere because of our lax regulation, virtually no regulation of groundwater in a lot of these places. And like Riverview down in the Wilcox area is a huge industrial dairy that has helped to contribute to groundwater levels going down and associated subsidence and earth fissures and those types of things, and wells drying up. And then also certain types of nuts are very water intensive as well. So those are kind of some of the some of the biggies that I'm aware of. Let's see, any other questions? All right, well, I don't see any, so thank you so much, Jennifer, especially for doing this when you have such a severe headache. And thanks, folks, for joining. We did record it, so we'll have the recording available on our YouTube channel. We'll also send that around and look for information coming out on the bills. We do have a bill tracker on our website. If you look at the legislative tab, it right now has about 200 bills on it. There's so many bills that I haven't had a chance to really review, and so we'll get that to a manageable level. But for now, there are a lot of bills listed, including a lot of water bills. We've started to add some descriptions and positions. You can, on that site, sort by bill number, by issue. So if you were just interested in water, you could sort them in that way and see what is there. So with that, thank you so much, and everyone enjoy. Oh, I should also mention we have another of these programs next Friday at noon. And so I hope you'll join and encourage others to join as well. And then the following week, we will have two programs, one on democracy and one on environmental justice. And I think both of those will be evening programs. So stay tuned on those as well. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer.